I only went to one, what would you call them, conventions or?
Comic-Con.
Yeah. It wasn't even a Comic-Con, it was just X-Files. It was in Chicago about 2 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And I had never been to any of those things except when Robert was trying to sell a movie. I went and, was helping out with Alien Trespass. But I was so amazed, I guess, particularly not only as an actress, but as a therapist, about how many women came to me and talked to me about their moms. And those who were either estranged or whose moms had died. The fact that they killed, Margaret Scully off really triggered a lot of trauma in them. And we did a lot of hugging. It was a remarkable experience. It wasn't what I was expecting at all. I thought it was all going to be sort of fan idolation or something like that. It was so heartfelt. It was amazing.
You saw all these questions, so this is nothing new that
Right.
we shared, but do you remember how you prepared for the role?
Well, first of all, I wasn't cast I thought this was a oneer. You know what I mean? I thought that I auditioned for just this one episode. I didn't know that, Margaret was going to be a running character. Mm. So that's different. That's how I prepare. How did I prepare for playing a scene where my husband dies? And if you're a female in this business, you are always preparing a scene for someone dying. Women cry, men get angry, right? So I've been doing this all my life. I've been crying all my life. So it was really difficult. My father, interesting enough, had died a couple of years before. It was right before we moved up to Washington. And I used that. And I remember it being, and it was, I just remember feeling so alone, that feeling of, in isolation and your sadness. And Gillian's character was just thinking about herself, and I was just thinking about my loss. And it was so cold that they had to wrap all these body heaters around us as we were standing outside. And one of the hardest things about the scene, as I recall, is one of the processes of bringing up tragedy in your life is you find a very difficult moment like death, and you bring it up and you experience it. Then as you're preparing for the part, you keep bringing it up, but you never have the catharsis. You never cry. So essentially, when you open it up, it's all there. Because it's very hard to cry, in film, because it's so segmented. And when they called cut, and then they just send you back to the trailer, the floodgates that hadn't opened about my dad opened. And I went back to my trailer, and there was just nobody there to hug me. No one knew what was going on with me. This was just an actor prepares. And so I remember that.
What was it like working on set while your husband was directing? Can you speak a little bit about that?
Well, I'll talk to you about it in broader terms, because I believe I can't remember, you'll have to correct me. I think we only did that one show together.
Yes.
Where I have to pull the plug on Gillian.
Yes.
Now, I had worked with my husband when we were just friends before we even got married. And that was incredible. I mean, I was just an independent actress. He was an independent director. And then, of course, I worked with shows that he was the executive producer on, but those were movies of the week. It was weird doing the X-Files because I was the director or executive producer's wife. So it was always rather a schizophrenic experience, because I couldn't just ever be one of the guys, because I was Daddy's wife. So it was, and then the first time that I realized that he was, because when I was doing movies of the week and he was the executive producer, I would have him stay off of the set because I did a lot of sort of super ego projection. So I wanted, he was my super ego. So so the first scene that we actually did was the one where all of us are in the waiting room. And this is not the whole show, but I just remember doing that scene. It was like an out of body experience. I didn't know who to be. I didn't know whether to be Bob's wife. I didn't know to do, to be the actress, there was just so many things going on in my head. It was so hard to sort of like pull it all in and just focus. But then once we just started moving, it was just, it was Bob, and I knew that he would have my back, and that thing is something that's really, when you're working, you don't always feel like the director has your back. I mean, he's there to make you your best, but he's also there to get the day done as quickly as possible, as best as possible. I mean, there's so many things that he has to check off, but he had my back. So
must have been hard with being One Breath being such an emotional episode as it was, but having him.
Oh, and particularly that scene. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, no, I look at it and I sort of go, what were you doing in that scene? There is a very funny experience though. Somewhere in the middle of the scene, David tries to convince me to do something, or he starts getting angry. I can't really remember the moment-to-moment play. But I cut him off just by saying, Fox. And David turned and went, where is my mother? She's in this room. And, as you transition from ingenue to mother to grandmother to this, to that, it's like you kind of go, wow, I really have that mother voice. It's already a part of who I am.
So you had to portray such an intimate relationship, mother-daughter relationship with Gillian. How do you, and you guys nailed it every time. That scene where you died, I cried my eyes out. But
which scene?
The one where you passed away, where the scenes where you were in the hospital.
Oh God, yeah.
But all of them, and the one in One Breath, and whenever you were, like when she was kidnapped, and every scene and every interaction, not only between you and Gillian, but you and David, discussing your relationship. How did you approach it together to make it so realistic?
I saw that question when you wrote it to me, and I went, wow, Gillian and I didn't talk about a thing. We never discussed the relationship. We never discussed how we were going to play the scene. We both came in prepared and did the scene, but it wasn't like, and I have done that with other parts where you talk about the history and you share the biography or the autobiography together, and we didn't. And when you asked me that question, I went, wow, why didn't we? I don't have the answer to that question, except that, I came in one every 2 shows in a season, or Gillian was 26, it was, but I think we both knew that we had it. And I always found it interesting that it was this cross between, from the get-go, from that very first funeral scene, there was this love, and then there was this edge. And Gillian at one point remarked about, the dichotomy of a mother-daughter relationship, the love and the edge, although we never talked about how we would play the scene. And yeah, it was always there. And I'll never forget, and I didn't think about this when I was preparing it, but when she said in the funeral scene, "Did Dad love me?" And I take a pause and I say, "He was your father." I mean, it's just sort of like, not now, not here. And I always felt that, I mean, I'm not Margaret Scully. I'm not anything like Margaret Scully. And when you crawl into a character, it's like you'll hear writers say this. I have to let my characters sometimes decide where the plot goes. And it's true with actors as well. I mean, once you find the character, you have to listen to their voice. And Margaret was very Catholic, very military, very East Coast. I think Gillian, the character that Gillian played, was because she came from this environment. She was the personification of all of those things, of being a scientist, of being logical. Melissa, the other daughter, was the escapee from that environment. But I think that's sort of where Margaret got her strength and also got her edge.
Did you guys have
Right.
a good relationship?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, as much as a relationship as you can have when you just come in and do a show.
Sure.
I mean, I think I only did maybe 12, 13 shows in total. So you come in, you do your job, you leave. So I can't really say that there was a relationship. You know, there was like actors doing their job, but when we did the last episode, you know, when Gillian left, or, you know, she was, I don't know, maybe 34 or something. I can't remember how old she was when the show ended. And when we did the death scene, which I have to tell you was, I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to go and do that. I didn't want to go and die with one line. And I was sort of like, you know, talked into it. So that, you know, but all of a sudden I met Gillian, the woman, and it was unbelievable. I mean, she was just like a real mensch. I mean, you know, all that maturity that happens between 26 and 46. You know, warm and embracing and talking about the scene and where it was going to go, and having trouble with the difficulty of getting the emotionality that you wanted for the scene. You know, and then asking me, can we do this again? Can we try this again? And I mean, it was like, wow, girl, you've really grown up. You are wonderful.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's amazing. Lauren.
This is going into your personal career. You're a practicing psychotherapist. You know, you were acting first. How did this come about? And then here's the great part of the question. Have you ever thought of analyzing the Mulder character?
No, but I certainly have analyzed, you know, Gillian's character, Dana. How did that come about? Okay, so I've been acting professionally since I was 15. And, you know, I started even studying when I was like 10 and 12. I would go from Queens to Manhattan to the, you know, Academy of Dramatic Arts or whatever. And, but somewhere, as an actress, and I also was not interested in doing film or television. I was more interested in doing stage. But after leaving the Seattle Rep, I went down to LA to see a boyfriend, and his agent signed me, and, you know, that the rest is history. Talent was stage and not really film. But so each time in film, because it's so so visual. You go, you're the child, you're the teenager, you're the ingenue, you're the mother. And those gaps in between as you're physically maturing are really dead zones where you don't act. Or you're the flavor of the month or the flavor of the year, and then you're the dead zone. And the dead zones were killing me because I had been used to working, most of my life. And Robert's, and when Robert, I guess you call him Bob, when we first came together, my career was kind of more elevated than his, and then it was just kind of like that. Sounds similar for men and women.
Pretty much.
And so I just, it was really a difficult thing for me. And I thought, oh, okay. I applied to the School of Social Work at USC and got in and spent 3 years with, I had 2 little kids, and it was really hard. I got my degree. I started practicing in LA. You have to get like 3,000 hours to do private practice. So I started working at Jewish Family Service in LA, and then was working there. Then all of a sudden we moved up to Washington, and once again, and Robert said, oh, throw your hat in the ring in Vancouver. And all of a sudden I was a very big fish in a very small pond. This is many, many years ago. And I started working immediately. I was doing one movie the week after another, miniseries. I was an honorary Canadian. SAG had not made the rule yet that you couldn't work in both unions. And I was the first American ever to work for the CBC. I played the British Prime Minister in a miniseries. And I got to, I was asked to come and do the awards, the Canadian, film awards. It was really great. But then I opened up my practice here. I got my license. I was able to bill insurance, and slowly the practice got really busy. So, but I find that the training for being an actor really helped me as being a therapist. I mean, to play a part, you have to have empathy for that part. And if you can't understand what makes that character tick, then you can't play it. And it's the same thing with clients. I mean, I have 2 rules. I can't work with anyone that hurts animals or children. So my empathy ends there.
Read. What is your favorite memory from the show?
You asked me that, and I kept thinking, what the hell was my favorite memory? It's the whole deal. It's not just one, especially the first 5 years. I mean, once they left, it really became sort of like, kind of like just a job going down there. And because the crew, it just became like one great big family. And you realize that you were, I mean, how many people get to say that they were in a groundbreaking series? I mean, the series was so incredible. And I was married to a man who was responsible for making it so incredible. I mean, it wasn't easy. I mean, the stress was through the roof. I mean, the kind of things that they were asking him to accomplish in 7-8 days. But the look of the show, the execution of the show, that was all him. Sometimes find it hard as his wife, because he was so behind the scenes, except when he was directing, that people his name does not pop up when people think of the X-Files so much as like, Chris Carter or Vince Gilligan, they don't. But Bob Goodwin, really, I feel personally, really made the show in those first 5 years.
So you had mentioned the show was groundbreaking. You had mentioned the overall look of it. Is there anything else that you think was key to the success of the show, looking back?
Well, besides the fact that it was visually groundbreaking, and the sense of, you know, like when I first started acting in television, one of the hardest things for me to do was the artificiality of dialogue. I mean, I came from theater and to this, you know, heightened drama where there was no naturalism in television. I mean, I look at young actors today and I go, you guys don't know how lucky you are. I mean, dialogue is written the way you speak, and no one asks you to speak up, please. Can you do it louder, faster? You know, cry more. You can be really, you know, small, which is what film is all about. And X-Files really pushed that, you know. But beyond that, I think it was really, look where we are now, right now, with like QAnon. I mean, the whole sort of conspiracy theory, starting with McCarthy and Watergate and, you know, Vietnam, created this culture that believed, and rightfully so, that the government doesn't always tell you the truth. I mean, now it's just like insane. But so here's all this cultural stuff that's really erupting. I don't think not only in the American culture, but just in culture in general. And I think that's why X-Files was so internationally famous, because everyone went, the truth is out there, but they're not telling us the truth. And so it always, so those two, and then of course the wonderful just horror of things, you know, just like, will we ever look at a vent in the wall the same way, you know? But I do think it really, you know, the meeting of all these forces right at the right time, socioeconomically and culturally, they really nailed it and struck the match. And then it just went, yes.
Last question we have for you, we ask everybody, and we've gotten amazing answers. So if you, no, it's nothing, no stress. It's not meant to be stressful, I promise. If you could say something to the fans of the show over from the last 25 plus years, what would it be?
Oh God. Just thank you. I mean, that's it. Thank you. Especially like those women I met at that convention that poured their hearts out to me. You rarely, as an actress, especially with a career like mine, that's sort of more episodic, you know, from Bonanza to X-Files, you know, you really don't get to hear from your fans. You know, you're not a star, you know. I'm a subliminal image. People think I'm someone's mother, sister, aunt, you know. I've been in everyone's living room, but they don't know who I am. So to sort of get that feedback from the fans and to sort of say that something I did really impacted them, that means the world to me.